Sound Cartel.
Can businesses put people and the planet first and still thrive? Two business thinkers share how it can be done in this week's episode as they explore two defining forces shaping the future of work and investment. Our first guest, Elio D'Amato of EnviroInvest, unpacks the case for environmentally conscious investing. He argues the global energy transition is creating real opportunities for diversified, profitable returns while reducing carbon emissions. Then we hear from leadership expert Mirjana Boznovska, founder and CEO of One Beyond Success, who looks ahead to the next decade and explains why the organisations that win will be the ones that build genuinely people-first workplace cultures. From Sound Cartel, I'm Grace Jennings-Edquist, and this is Business Essentials. Our first guest is Elio D'Amato, co-founder and executive director of EnviroInvest. He joins us to share his thoughts on why environmentally conscious investing is no longer just an ethical choice, but a compelling investment opportunity. Drawing on 3 decades in equities, Elio explains the business case behind the energy transition and how reducing carbon emissions could shape profitable portfolios for decades to come. He begins by telling me briefly about his background and how it led to his current position.
Greenwashing is marketing or communications that present an image of, being more environmentally friendly than is justified by the facts, of course. And we get some common types, which is, using vague or non-verifiable claims. We also highlight minor environmental improvements. We should be really looking at the big picture rather than the small little wins, and presenting future targets as possible targets, but we're not taking demonstrable steps towards achieving that goal into the near future. And things like, claims around recyclability of the product, also using green imagery and all that sort of things. All of that really leads to what greenwashing actually is.
I'm wondering, what kind of companies do we see engaging in this greenwashing and why are they doing it?
Look, we're more likely to see greenwashing in sectors which are very much heavily focused towards the consumer. We also look at the investment sector as well as, regulatory sectors where there's a lot of pressure in that regard to demonstrate those environmental credentials. But, things like, let's just start with the elephant in the room, the big one, the energy and fossil fuel companies. Of course, they may very well sell their green credentials, yet be very large emitters themselves. Then, of course, we talk the financial services space, and ESG or environmental and social governance investing is a big trend and commands a lot of money, and our superannuation funds are looking towards that outcome. So therefore funds may be very well geared towards speaking in a language that they want to hear when their actions may very well be different. And we've had some high profile cases like ASIC has taken the likes of Vanguard as well as Mercer to court in regards to their claims of green, as it were, not being as true as what they actually are. Further on, we also look at manufacturing, such as retail consumer goods, for example, as well as, various other fast-moving goods, plastics and all the like, because obviously consumers, as it were, want to buy environmentally aware assets, and as a result of that, that may very well sway their purchasing decision. Fashion textiles is also another sector whereby we've seen a lot of, this greenwashing focus because the eco-fibre, as it were, is definitely becoming a term that's we're very familiar with, and therefore, as a result, it's being watched quite closely. And then, of course, you've got your agricultural goods, and then to tail it off, building construction materials, whereby, again, very carbon intensive, but obviously moving more towards environmentally aware production methods, which has its drawbacks, some successes and failures, of course, but very much in the eye of the regulators as they make sure that those companies stick true to form.
What are the regulations around greenwashing and who is regulating it?
Well, look, it's an interesting question because greenwashing is not a law in itself. So there's no greenwashing law or statute, as it were, whereby we all adhere to and follow directly. It's a bit of a mishmash. I mean, there's consumer law, whereby obviously we don't want to talk the environment, we want to act the environment, and therefore we're always aware as to false and misleading claims that cause consumers to purchase assets that may not be necessarily or may not align with what they very well believe. ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, well, they've taken a very harsh position in regards to a lot of corporate Australia around this idea of greenwashing. Again, as I spoke to, it's very much an attractive thing, particularly for super funds and investors, as it were, and therefore we want to make sure that anyone invested in that space is definitely, walking the talk, as it were, and following through in regards to what their commitments are. And obviously, they want to make sure that there's no false or misleading claims there to garner investor interest, as it were. We also have the ACCC, the Consumer and Competition Commission, which has definitely taken up, again, a lot of the mantle in regards to reducing the risk of these scurrilous claims, as it were. Look, they've done a number of internet sweeps, as it were, in order to, get a short list of companies that they've got their eye on, and they will continually monitor, along with ASIC as well, in regards to their claims, and make sure that they're all fine. And then, of course, they'll look at various organisations which have the certification status, or, many investors or many listeners will be aware of B Corp, for example. Well, making sure that their standards are rigorous and the like, and therefore companies that adhere to those standards very much meet the standards required by the regulators here in Australia. So, in sum, a mishmash in regards to trying to prevent greenwashing is basically the best way to describe it, because there's no specific greenwashing law in of itself.
Why are regulators trying to take a line against greenwashing? Is it because it's so common, or, some other reason?
The main reason why is obviously consumer protection and market integrity. Obviously, they want to make sure that they protect the consumer, that anyone who purchases something, or that it is as of label, as it were, in regards to what they do acquire, in regards to any potential investment and the like, or in whatever product, they want to make sure that they stand by what it is that the label says. They also want to prevent crowding out. So, this is where, for example, a large company that has significant marketing clout may very well crowd out a company doing the actual right thing in order to achieve what it is that they say they want to achieve. So, as a result of that, by using false and misleading claims, then they could potentially do that. So they want to avoid that as a process. You then have your various reputation and systematic risk. I mean, there's nothing worse for a business than to come out and say you're doing something that you're actually not. That is obviously not great at all, or particularly if you read about it in the papers rather than do the investigation yourself. Then there's also various other legal issues. You've also got, precedents. So hopefully whatever penalties or imposts, and like I said, ASIC have clamped down quite heavily on the likes of Vanguard and Mercer in recent times. That is to act as a deterrent for others who may very well wish to use the term environment or ESG loosely without actually backing up their claims, and making sure that that's solid. So that's very important. And look, let's face it, there's evolving expectations from both the general public and investors as a whole too. I mean, once upon a time it was novel, it was a great idea, and, we all believed what it was they said in the headline. But when we scratch beneath the surface, then we want to know that they actually doing what they say. And very much we want to ensure that companies are doing that. And then obviously on the back of that, we want to be consistent, so that when we do analyse a company, whether it's company A or company B, that we've got a consistent outcome at the end of the day. So obviously they're the reasons why we're incurring this, because look, there's going to be some pain, we know that, but I think it's for the greater good in the long term. And once everyone gets comfortable and consistent in regards to its various standards and the like that are out there and the various protections, then we'll feel a lot more comfortable investing in the space.
Well, my last question is, I suppose, a bit of some practical takeaways for business owners, business leaders listening. What should businesses know about how to avoid greenwashing when they're, say, offering or promoting sustainability-related products?
Look, we can obviously dig a bit of a hole for ourselves in regards to the information, but big fan of the KISS principle, the keep it simple, stupid, as they say. And obviously, be accurate with what you say, be specific, as well as make sure that what you have is verifiable. So, if you're going to use terms like eco or green or the like, then you want to make sure that you're very much targeted in regards to what you say. And you also want to make sure that you can back it up. Because, of course, if someone questions, then that's when things get a little bit rough. Now, if you're going to present future goals, that's fine, do so, but don't say they're present achievements. Okay, so if you're going to say we're going to cut emissions, that's great, and that's fine, but selling it as it's going to happen without having the verified evidence or that we're going to do it, that is a big no-no, as it were. So if you're going to make a claim in regards to a future goal, make sure it's that and say how you're going to get there. Also, discuss your boundaries. And any limitations that you may have. Don't worry, we're all friends. You can be open and honest in regards to your current position. Make sure you do that. Explain trade-offs so that everyone knows, and that'll be very important because, of course, no one thinks that, what a great idea of adding something. But inevitably, we have to take something away. So be open with that. Ensure that, as I said, make sure that they're meaningful. Okay, that what you say and that you've got everything in place. Again, gonna is a bit of a dangerous word when it comes to environmental investing or ESG investing, as it were, and definitely something that the greenwashing gods take a very close look at. And if you can use the verified third-party authentication, be it either software that you may very well purchase or an organisation that has the standards required in order to ensure that you are meeting those ESG requirements. Don't be selective either, okay? I mean, it's obvious we love cherry picking, but obviously we want to make sure that our approach is broad. So don't focus or hone in on a specific individual thing. You look at it from the holistic point of view. That is very important. Also, make sure that your images and anything you use in marketing is based in reality as well. So don't have, let's say me being in the investment industry, don't have happy older people in, being rained upon by dollar notes, for example, or $50 notes. It's not achievable. There will always be a cut and thrust, no doubt, in between marketing and what the reality is. And therefore, if you do choose to use imagery or the like, make sure that it does reflect what it is you want to do. And ultimately, the last thing is to make sure that your internal documentation is now pat, because of course it won't be a problem until it is. Therefore, if you do get looked at by one of the regulators or the like, then you want to make sure that you've got a documented process which explains what it is you are currently trying to do, and therefore you can ultimately show them that that is the case, and therefore receive a tick, as it were, in regards to that. And I suppose always, keep your conservative hat on. Don't get prone to being too overly excited. And what you'll find is you'll be pretty much within the realms of what is required by the regulators.
That was Elio D'Amato, co-founder and executive director of EnviroInvest. Now to the future of work. What will it really demand from leaders and organisations? Mirjana Boznovska has laid out a few suggestions in her new book, Future of Work, A Blueprint. Mirjana, who's also founder and CEO of One Beyond Success, explains how leadership is shifting from performance management to unlocking human potential. Drawing on more than 35 years of experience in people development, human behaviour and leadership, Mirjana also argues that people-first workplace cultures are no longer optional but essential. She begins by telling me what a people-first workplace culture really is and why it matters.
It's basically placing people at the heart of the organisation, not as a one-time imperative, but every day as part of their strategy. It's not a soft skill, it's an actual business imperative. And, I think in the increasingly rapid world of work and dynamic, it's crucial that we look beyond skills and strategy and look at how can we develop people beyond their capacity of skills and knowledge. So look at developing a greater self-awareness, self-responsibility and self-leadership that enable them to own their role, but more importantly, just bring their individual best each and every day.
I'd love to ask a little bit about what we can expect from workplaces going forward. because of obviously your book is called The Future of Work, a blueprint. What will the next decade of work demand from organisations?
It really is a mindset shift. So what we know is that the old paradigm is not working. And we know that because statistics show us that almost 80% of people are disengaged. And this costs somewhere in the $9.6 trillion. These statistics come from Gallup. We also know that 80% of workplaces are operating in a survival mode. So even the most well-resourced workplaces often are still the undercurrent of that is survival mode, the fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, imposter syndrome. And all of these things impact how we show up. They impact the choices we make. They impact how we collaborate with others. And so there is a huge opportunity to redefine what that looks like. And at the heart of that is investing in people, investing in their internal growth so they can obviously lead from that most authentic state and then be open to collaborations and value-driven alignment with others.
Now, we talked about what the next decade of work will demand from organisations. What do you think the next decade of work will demand from leaders?
It really evolves the scope of the leader. So the role evolves from performance management to really igniting potential at the source within each individual. And that's a huge paradigm shift. I mean, it's a huge mindset shift for the individual, for the team, for the organisation, and for the future of how the organisation is going to navigate its workplace culture. And it's very exciting because beyond the capacity of the KPIs, it's stepping into each person understanding their why and how their purpose contributes in the overall purpose and vision for the organisation. So it really unlocks the infinite potential of the people, the culture, and the sustainable impact that the organisation is making beyond just profit and bottom line. So it's a very exciting, I think, time frame to be in. And the exciting thing is that the future of work is not a distant concept. It's happening now and it's happening in real time. And it really is asking us to look at 4 defining principles. One is sustainable leadership. And what does that look like? Again, igniting the potential within the source, within each person, rather than just an overall, surface level initiative. It's asking us to look at sustainable well-being. So well-being that, ignites a state of wellness at every level of the organisation and every generation. And it also looks at connection in an increasing AI-driven world, particularly behind computer screens. How can we remain connected to one another on a deeper level? And the 4th one is business as a force for good, for the greater good, sustainable impact rather than just profit and bottom line. So these 4 principles are what's going to drive the future of work and is definitely embedded in the ebook, but also in the principles of what we're driving at One Beyond Success.
Against this context that you've just laid out, what are your top tips for business leaders to really prepare for this next decade of work?
Yeah, that's a really important one. And you're going to notice from the tips that I give, it's got nothing to do with the doing. It's got nothing to do with, your KPIs or your morning routines, which are great to have, but they're very much a personalized thing. The tips I'm going to give you are around the being. So leadership, as we mentioned, the leadership role is evolving beyond just performance. It's beyond a position and title. It's really a state of being. So the first tip is be courageous. Be courageous to challenge the status quo and to challenge business as usual. Step out of that paradigm of this is how we've done it all around here and look at the opportunities that are going to elevate, team members beyond their role. The second one is be open to new perspectives, to think outside the box, be open to, perspectives that come from team members. So, of course, to be proactive in that sense, to lead from authenticity, and obviously build these cultures of trust and transparency. And the next one is think expansively, be open to think expansively, because when you do that, you recognize that your role as a leader is not to have all the answers, but to really harness the wisdom of the group and how to extract that information and knowledge from those around us, because, we're better and stronger together. The fourth one is to really be the change you want to experience at work and in your culture. So it starts with the leader to steer the ship, but it doesn't end there, because it's heavy lifting when the leader has to think that it's their role to, steer the ship. Yes, but also it takes everybody's input to cultivate a culture of trust, openness. So be the change, but be inspired to ignite that within others. And the fifth one would be kind. Be kind to yourself and others, because it's not about perfection. We don't always get it right, but every day is an opportunity to step more into that authentic self and to deepen our practices of self-awareness, self-responsibility, and leading from within. So, just embody that. It's an embodiment rather than a state of skill set.
I'll move on to my final question, which is about how can leaders activate self-determined motivation and values-driven collaboration, specifically around the science of sustainable motivation. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, this is something that I get really excited about. I am really excited about the science behind all of this. As I said, in my 35 plus years, I've witnessed this and experienced this in real time and, the practice of it. But when it actually links back to the science behind it, it's really empowering and grounding. And I think a first step for leaders is to really understand what motivates their people. What motivates their people beyond just surface level initiative, but what is actually the motivation that inspires sustainable change and impact and transformation. And so the theory behind this, and the leading theory in the human motivation, is self-determination theory. Bessie and Ryan are the authors of that theory, and it's what the One Blueprint is based on, this science of motivation. And what it says is that as humans, we are motivated to be our best when three core psychological needs are met. The first one is autonomy, and it's feeling that sense of freedom to choose, to make the power of choice and to align our unique blueprint of who we are with our environment and what we do. The second one is to feel a sense of relatedness or connection. So connection to our peers, to our roles, to, the wider stakeholders. And the third one is the competence, feeling competent and accomplished in who we are and the delivery of that in our own personal lives, but also in the work. So when those core psychological needs of autonomy, connection, and competence are met, we become self-driven, and this is what builds sustainable motivation. And it also is what deepens our engagement. It's also where we become aligned with our purpose and meet those sustainable outcomes. And these core psychological needs are embedded in the One Blueprint, which is, the lived experience in workplace culture.
That was Mirjana Boznovska, founder and CEO of One Beyond Success. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Follow Business Essentials podcast across social media and head to businessessentialspodcast.au for more. Business Essentials is a Sound Cartel podcast. Producers are Nick Schillberger, Nicole Goodman and myself. Technical production is by Pete Letts. I'm Grace Jennings-Edquist. Thanks for listening. We'll bring you more Business Essentials next week. Sound Cartel.